All right, ladies and gentlemen, important announcement. As of November 20th, 2022, I have officially earned my OSCP certification. And just to get the proof and all that out of the way, you can find the link to the credentials down in the description section below for verification and all of that. So what was different? What had allowed me to achieve the certification versus my failed attempts? Well, really, as the motto, as they say in the motto, really try harder was key for me, I would say. And surprisingly enough, I would say this was the attempt that I studied the least for beforehand. I prepared the least beforehand for this attempt. In fact, tomorrow I am going to Mexico City for a work trip, and I almost didn't take the exam attempt because I was like, you know what? We have Thanksgiving coming up. We have this trip to Mexico City and everything coming up. You know, maybe I'll just get back to it and take the exam after the holidays are over and things settle down a bit. But then I was like, you know what? Let me just go for this. Let's see what happens here. So I put it on the calendar for the 20th, a few days before taking Thanksgiving break. And I was like, yeah, we'll see where this goes. And honestly, I wasn't really expecting too much, but I think that really helped take the pressure off, because I would say now that I've experienced the OSCP in the full spectrum, right, I would say that the most difficult part of it is really the mental game. And that is what I try to teach on the channel, try to help you guys with, because the way this channel started, I mean, I know a lot of you guys have joined later on. I mean, we're up above 10K subscribers as of the time of recording here. When I started, this was like 100 subscribers, 200 subscribers. And the reason that I made this channel was not really the educational content that we have here today. It was actually just as a vlog while I was taking the OSCP back in 2018. Now, I took a huge break in between that, and this year is when I really got back into it again, I would say. But that is how the channel started out. I was just like, you know what? I'm pursuing the certification. A lot of people want this cert, and I just want to share my experiences, you know, within the confines of what I'm allowed to share with you guys, of course. And so I just made a vlog talking about my experiences. I remember watching some back in the day, thought it was a cool idea for a channel. So that is something I try to carry with me still today. Of course, we have a lot of educational content. My main goal is to, of course, elevate your cybersecurity skill set, right? Get you into the field, get you into those higher paying jobs, of course. But I still want to capture that idea of, this is what I'm learning. Let me just share with you the experience. And as I'm leveling up, I want to enable you guys to level up as well. The huge thing is the mental battle on the OSCP. It's a matter of really, I think it's normal on these exams. And now that I've gotten a few certifications under my belt now, I felt a similar way when I was taking the Pentester Academy Certified Azure Red Team Cert exam, where you feel like you're failing up until the point that you pass, right? There's doubts, at least in the back of your mind, maybe not in the front of your mind, maybe, you know, some lingering doubts in the back of your mind. And that's completely normal. That's something you need to understand. And this is a very well-known thing, you know, imposter syndrome and things like that. I wouldn't say that I really suffer from it as much as some people certainly seem to, but it is always a lingering doubt. Like, you know, what if I can't pass this on this attempt, right? You know, what if this is not the attempt? But here's the thing, right? It's fine to feel what you feel, but you need to not let that affect your actions. So I would say a big change for me this time was just, you know, acknowledging that, but just keeping, you know, just moving forward, just staying the course, and, you know, really just putting that voice, you know, letting that voice talk or whatever, but just, you know, keep pushing through and trying to find stuff. And now, of course, I took some breaks, and, you know, I followed the things that we talk about on this channel that we've been talking about over the last few years, taking breaks occasionally and stuff like that. But I will say I definitely did try harder than my previous attempts, in the fact that I was putting more focus, more energy, more effort, more time into it than I had in the previous. Now, next question is, oh, well, how did you sleep? Did you eat? And yes, I ate dinner and everything. I was doing really well at, so I started the exam at 3 p.m. or no, 2 p.m. actually. And so I worked until about I think it was like 6 o'clock. I took a dinner break. At that point, I had already gotten the Active Directory set, and I did the extra credit. I was one of those psychos that actually put in 2 months, countless hours to finish that extra credit report. It ended up being 500 and a little over 550 pages. So definitely an insane amount. And I had enough points to pass even without the extra credit when it was all said and done. There was just one machine that I didn't get. And so it wouldn't have mattered anyways, but it was nice to have that reassurance in my back pocket for sure. So would I recommend it? Not necessarily, but if you want the extra assurance, you can go ahead and do it. It was a little overkill, I will say. But so much of this is the mental part for me, right? Because I don't know about you guys, but when I looked at the syllabus, for a pretty long time when I looked at the syllabus, it all seemed really basic, right? I know there's a lot of topics that it covers, but especially if you strip out just what you need to know to pass the exam, what would be on the exam, all the topics that will be on the exam, for a lot of us that have been going at it for a little bit, we know all this stuff, right? We know it, but it's just a matter of a couple things, really. One, the OSCP is a test of your methodology. That's something that people say is very true. That is what they're really trying to test you on, is if you have a ton of different stuff to look at, how efficiently can you move through that in 24 hours? Can you find the vulnerability? Can you find a way in? Now, of course, in the real world, there's usually more than one way in. You know, obviously, social engineering is an option in many cases, right? But really, I think they do a really good job of teaching you the methodology. And even though there's typically only one way in, the whole point of it is to test that methodology. How efficient can you be? And it is very relevant to the job, because there have been a lot of times where, especially when you're talking about real world applications, they're a lot larger than these CTF machines, right? Than your typical CTF machine, right? It will have a lot more, let's say, pages on their websites, a lot more. Maybe you have a list of servers, you're doing an internal pen test, and you have a ton of IPs that you have to go through. You only have a certain amount of time to do that. And so having that methodology is crucial. So I think they do teach a very important skill set, but it is different than what you're used to if you just do CTFs off of Hack the Box and stuff like that. It's definitely a different thing. So for me, really just focusing in on the try harder aspect and refining my methodology was key. That's another thing I'll say, is there's different ways to go about developing one's methodology, right? For me, I didn't really write out per se every step in my methodology. And that's personally not what I preferred to do. I did start on that, but yeah, it didn't end up being too useful for me. But really, just as I was working through the machines in the lab, or if I was doing any kind of CTF on other platforms, what I would start to do is I would really try to be more methodical in my approach. So in the past, when I was doing labs, when I was taking the previous exam attempts, especially in 2018, I would be very prone to falling down rabbit holes. And how can you protect yourself against rabbit holes? How did I protect myself against the rabbit holes? Well, I will be more methodical in my testing. So I will start off by looking for the low-hanging fruit. So for example, let's say you have all the common web ports open. Well, I'm going to typically start with FTP. And this kind of feeds into one of the guys' questions on this channel. Like, what is your methodology? I'll give you some of it here. Maybe I'll do a dedicated video to it later if you guys are interested in that. But I would start with something like FTP and just check for anonymous FTP, because what I've found is that, especially in CTFs and stuff, a lot of times you will have anonymous FTP access, and you could normally get some really important information from that. So you might find a file that helps you further get a foothold into the machine. So I like to start with that because it's very quick to check, right? Do I have anonymous FTP? Let me try to log in and see. And then once I do I have write access to that share? Are there any files or folders on that share, things that would be useful to me? That's where I start with, is a low-hanging fruit thing. The next thing that I will move on to, if it's available, is SMB. I like to look can I get a null session on SMB? If I can, what shares do I have access to? Do I have read access to IPC? Then I can do like an RID brute force attack to enumerate all the users on the machine or in the domain, in the case of a domain controller, right? If I don't have null session, do I have guest access, the guest account on a Windows machine? So I try like username guest, empty password, and see. If I have either of those things, I'll run enum for Linux NG. That's what I prefer. The up-to-date version, not the old, outdated enum for Linux. I found that has a lot of errors. I think it was written in Perl, so it's a very outdated script. So I run enum for Linux NG, and it's rewritten in Python, and it'll do a bunch of handy enumeration for me on the machine, especially on Windows machines. And so that'll give me some information that I can use for the foothold. Those are the two things that I like to really prioritize early on. And from there, I'll usually look into any web servers that might be available and just go from there. A lot of times the web servers, the reason that I save them for a little bit later, I know a lot of people, their methodology is to look at the web server first. The reason that I don't is usually it's a huge attack surface. There's a lot to look at, and let's face it, there's an infinite amount of potential vulnerabilities in port 80 or 443 or any of these web ports, right? Versus something like FTP. There's only a few things that you could realistically find in that. Of course, banner grabbing is important, checking the versions, looking for known vulnerabilities, all that stuff. In the past, the reason that I was so susceptible to these rabbit holes is that I would just find one thing that would be a potential vulnerability, and I wouldn't move on to the next thing quick enough. I was not methodical. So I'd be like, okay, we have this version of this running. Let me see if I can exploit it. And I would, maybe I would find a public exploit somewhere online, and I would just, try to run that and modify the code, look into the code, and I would be really in the weeds in the technical aspect of it, where maybe that wasn't even the path, right? And I wouldn't know that. I would spend all this time, I would waste all this time just really trying to get that thing working, rather than saying what I should have done in that scenario was say, okay, this might be the vector, but let me look at these other things first and see where they lead. And if they are not fruitful, if I don't get any useful information out of that or foothold, then I'll come back to this, and then I'll get in the weeds with getting this thing to work. So that is really the key mindset that you need to have on the OSCP, is that of a methodical and collected mindset. I know it's difficult on the exam because there's a lot going on, 24-hour exam, you got the time pressures and all that, you need 70 points, but really I would say for me, it was really just slowing things down and being more methodical in my approach. And I started doing that while I was practicing. And even though, like I said, I prepared the least for this exam attempt, just preparing in the right way, in that methodical type of way, I think was really instrumental in me being able to pass with more than enough points on this attempt. I ended up getting 80 points on this attempt, so you guys are aware. And so that is like one of the huge things as well. And then I would say another thing is that, don't get discouraged by previous attempts, even if you weren't even that close to passing, is what I would say as well. Because the Active Directory set is 40 points. So if you don't get Active Directory, then from a point perspective, it might look like you were way off, but really you might have just been a few steps away from getting domain admin. So that was the case on the previous attempt, where I got so many steps in the Active Directory set, but I didn't actually get the final step, or maybe there's like 1 or 2 steps left that I didn't get. And because of that, I got 0 points instead of the 40 that I would have otherwise got. So on paper, it would seem that I was far off from passing, but really that was not the case. I would have passed if I got that earlier. So that is another thing that I think is really important. And what will I be doing from here? I'm sure that is a question that a lot of you guys have on your minds. Like, what's next for me now that I have the OSCP? OSCP, I'm going right into it. Actually, a lot of coworkers either have OSCP or are actively pursuing it. So that'll be pretty nice. I'll have a network of people around me. The funny thing is, like, my team is so advanced that I'm on right now. I think, the only pen tester on my team that did not have OSCP at my current job. So it'll be nice now to have some people in there with me, right, by my side, on the same path as me. I always talk about that on this channel. It's really important to network with people. And to be fair, you could definitely do this if you're not in the same situation where you have coworkers pursuing this stuff. That's what all these Discord channels are for. Honestly, I really that's another thing I need to do now that I have this thing, is really focus on revamping and overhauling my Discord. I know I have not given it much attention, much love recently. And I will say as well, hey, if you're interested in being a moderator, I would like to, really get this thing cleaned up and get this, make this into the community that I wanted it to be before. So, hey, feel free to send me an email, ryan@elevatecybersecurity.net, if you would be interested in being a admin on moderator on the Discord channel. I'll also make a post in there for you guys as well. That's something that you're interested in. That will help me a lot to really build this into a community. But yeah, going for OSCP would be the next step. I'm going to spend a little bit of time doing some programming stuff. I want to build a C2 in C# as a means of getting better at C#. It's something that I've noticed is really important in the offensive tradecraft. If you want to develop your own tools, if you want to be able to bypass antivirus and stuff like that, I understand that is a huge part of OSEP, the experience penetration tester course by OffSec, is they make pretty heavy use of C# and things like that. So I'm going to do a little bit of practice of just getting more acquainted with it. I know we did some videos on the channel. What I'd like to do is actually build a C2 in C# as a means of just getting more comfortable with the language. And I think, it might definitely be something that I continue to build upon as time goes on, maybe make it into a really nice open source C2 framework. So I'll be keeping you guys posted on that as well. But yeah, let me know if you have any questions on OSCP on the journey. I just want to share this one with you today. I would say don't overthink it too much either. This is what I would say as well, is that you read a lot of information online, people that have failed it and stuff before. And I think that if you consume too much of that information, you can really build it up in your mind to be this crazy thing that it really isn't as bad as it seems. It's really not that impossible, no matter where you are right now. Especially if you're looking over the syllabus and you're like, I know what this is, I know what that is, why can't I pass this thing? Most likely it is an issue of two things, right? Methodology and mindset. Just try harder mindset and not letting it rattle you, not letting it get to you. Just keep moving forward. And one mantra that has really helped me so much in all the certifications that I've achieved so far is this, right? Say to yourself, if I fail, it's not going to be because I didn't give it my 100% effort, right? It's very easy to kind of save face, to preserve yourself by not trying fully, because then you can go back and justify, well, if I would have tried my hardest, I would have passed, but I didn't, right? I had this circumstance going on. I had this holiday coming up. I had this obligation coming up. But if I didn't have those things and I could try 100%, then I would have passed it, right? It's very comfortable to be able to say that. But you have to realize that that is an excuse that is not going to serve you ultimately. And you just need to live by the mantra. If I fail this exam, it's not going to be because I didn't give it my 100%. So hopefully this advice is helpful to you guys. Like I said, let me know if you have any further questions that I can address maybe in a future video or in the comments section by asking your question down below. And if you want to get into some technical content, of course, I have that on screen for you right now. I'll see you guys right over in those videos. Thanks for watching.